for the start of this presentation. And the title of this presentation was Understanding the Call to Holiness and Sainthood. In order for us to understand that call, we have to know a few things. And I'm pointing at the wrong thing. We have to first know who we are and where we came from, know exactly where it is that we're going, and know how we are going to get there. Now, when Emily first asked me to give this presentation, I told her, I don't think I'm the right person for this. God had better plans in store for me. As you can see, here I am. So, let us break these open to figure out what it is to understand this call of holiness. The first thing that we have to understand is that we are sinners. Just as the song talked about, we are the nail in Jesus' crown. We are Judas' kiss. We continually sin every day of our lives. Each of us has been born with original sin. The sin of our first parents, Adam and Eve, when Eve ate the apple off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they gave it to her husband Adam, and that's how we are here we are today. But, thankfully, Jesus has instituted the sacrament of baptism, which has cleansed us from original sin. Now, how many of you are familiar with the catechism? Okay, not a lot. So to kind of give you a brief intro to what the catechism is a book of a lot of documents on the church about faith. And if you have any questions about what baptism is or what communion is or anything about the church or even types of sin, look in the catechism. So to help you understand and to kind of draw some truth to what I'm saying about being cleansed at baptism of original sin, I'm going to have Amber read from section 405 of the catechism, which talks about baptism.
Baptism, by imparting the life of Christ's grace, erases original sin and turns a man back towards God. But the consequences for nature, weakened and inclined to evil, persist in man and summon him to spiritual battle.
So right there, it says, okay, we had original sin, we'll cleanse of that, but we're still inclined and still have the knowledge of doing wrong. We must understand this if we ever plan to understand our call to holiness. Now, a trivia question would be, what individuals were born without original sin? Mary and Jesus. Mary was immaculately conceived, born without sin, and remained sinless. What? Conceived, I'm sorry. Immaculately conceived and remained sinless throughout her whole life. And of course, Jesus, who is fully man and fully God, was also without sin. The next part of the question is, where are we going? Our goal as Christians is to be united with Christ here on earth and, of course, in heaven, which is kind of given. Duh. But to understand our earthly call to be united with Christ here on earth, we need to be united with Him in our families, in our dorm rooms, and in our communities. So you have your roommates, you have your floor. If you live in an apartment, you have your roommates there. If you're married, like I am, which I don't think any of you guys are, you have your family that you're supposed to be united with Christ in Him. And if you look at Matthew chapter 18, verse 20, it says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am present there. Meaning Christ is in here right now. This is us being united with Him in a community. You guys come here every week to help learn more about Jesus Christ and to be united with Him. And then, of course, in heaven, you're going to be there praising with the saints and the angels to the glory of God. I mean, we do that at Mass every day when we sing, Holy, Holy, Holy. That's the song of the angels and the saints in heaven to God. Now, the tough question. How are we going to get there? The first thing we have to do is we have to redeem our identities as sinners. Now, the question is, if we are sinners, and we've been cleansed of original sin, then what are we? If you look in Genesis 1:27, it says, God created man in His image. In the divine image He created him. Male and female He created them. So now that begs the question, what is the image and likeness of God? If you look in 1 John chapter 4, verse 16, it says, we have come to know and to believe in the love of God has for us. God is love. And whoever remains in love remains in God, and God in him. There it is, very simply. If we are made in the image and likeness of God, and God is love, that means we are made to love. We are made in the image and likeness of love, which translates into we are made to love, and we are made to be loved. Now, that concept of love is a large one. And I know you guys have Father Eric Shield coming in a couple weeks to talk about love, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. But I want to give you a brief intro to understand where it is that we're going with this concept of love. There are four different words to describe what love is. Storge being that affectionate love, that love for, I really like Snickers bars. They are the best candy bar, by the way. Or I really love chocolate. Or I really love a 67 Chevy GT Cobra, which is a car. It's really not going to love me back because it's a car. Then there's eros, which is romantic love, which is the love that is shared between a man and a woman in holy matrimony. There's filial love, which is friendship, the love that you have for your friends, like, oh, this is my friend, meet this person. And that's also the same type of love that we have for our parents, because it's by association. The love that I really want to touch on today is that unconditional love. And I gave this verse to some freshmen in high school on Monday, and they looked at me like I was crazy. So I'm hoping not to get the same reaction from you all. Can someone tell me John 3:16? Okay, everybody should be jumping up and down because you guys should know this. And if you don't, you're going to learn it right there.
God created man, for he so loved the world. Something like
Anybody want to help him out? He needs an assist to get the slam done. Say it again. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him might not perish, but have eternal life. This love is unconditional. The love that Jesus showed us on the cross was completely for us. He, in essence, really got nothing from that. And that's the love that we need to learn to show every single day of our lives. When we say we are called to love and we are made to love, this is the type of love that we need to do consistently, because this is the type of love that God shows us. Because he already died on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins. If you go back to the song that we just listened to, he says, you love me anyway, even though I did all of this bad stuff, I laughed in your face, but you loved me anyway. Because his love is unconditional. There's no condition upon it. That's going to be key here. Now, the next slide, we're going to transition from our call to holiness to understanding what a saint is. Now, I want to mention to you guys that there are two different types of saints. There's the saint with the large S, like St. Francis de Sales, St. Thomas More. Those are saints that have been canonized by the Catholic Church, and we can say that they were in full communion with Jesus Christ and God in heaven. Then there's the saint with the little s. Those people like, Martin Luther King Jr., who was a saint for all the work that he did during the Civil Rights Movement. Okay? They are not the same. Understand that. That doesn't make the little s saint bad. I'm going to tell you a little joke. I was in Fireside talking with Father Mike about this idea, and he turns to me and says, Cameron, you're a big-ass saint. I'm not, by the way. But there's definitely a distinction that needs to be made there because so many people get confused on what a saint is. So, the ultimate question is, how do we become saints? Because that's what we all want to do. We all want to be in heaven, correct? All right. This next slide is going to have an exhaustive.
I just want you to clarify what being a saint is, and even a little less saint and being in heaven, what the correlation is there, what's the connection.
Okay. So like the biggest saint is canonized by the Catholic Church, and we can say for certain that they are in heaven. The little s saint, you could argue, is someone that has shown God's love in the world, but it's not necessarily been recognized by the Catholic Church with all of the requirements it is to be canonized. Just because you're a little s saint does not mean you can't be in heaven. being a little less saint is a good thing. It's a very good thing. Okay? Does that make sense? Is that clarified?
Well, I want to say one thing. Only saints are allowed in heaven. So you have to be a little less saint if you want to get to heaven.
She's right. That's why I got married, because I'm dumb. Okay. So the next slide is an exhaustive list of all the things that we have to do to be a saint. Now the print is pretty small, so I'll read it off to you, but this is what we have to do. Oh, I forgot one. You got the point. In order to know that we can love, we have to understand how we are able to love. And the only reason that we can love is because Jesus Christ and God loved us first. Since we're made in His image, He had to love us first in order for us to do the same thing to Him. And even back to our neighbors and our brothers and sisters in Christ. That is a key point here, is that because He loved us first, we are able to love. Now this next slide is the exhaustive list of everything we have to do to be a saint. And if I'm wrong, oh well. Okay. Pray 5 times a day, never have sex, never desire to have sex, never use foul language, be a priest, deacon, nun, sister, or brother, never be married, never have had kids, be poor, go to Mass every day, pray the rosary every day, adore the Lord in adoration daily, never watch bad movies, never listen to bad music, never had looked at pornography, never in your life committed a sin of any nature, venial or mortal. How many people have done everything on this list? Nobody's raising their hand. Look, Mr. Color King. Nobody's raising their hand. Because this is not how to be a saint. Okay? I just made that up, by the way, because of the whole. This is not how to be a saint. Now, I want to mention that there are things on this list that will help you to become a saint. You know, going to Mass every day, that's never a bad thing. Receiving Jesus Christ in His body and blood, soul, and divinity every day, that's a great thing. That's a huge source of grace for us. You know, praying, those are all good things. Some of those are in there for purely comedic purposes. I think you know what they are. But you guys really want to know the key to being a saint. And this slide is for real, I promise. Love God. If you look at Matthew chapter 22, verse 34 to 40, this is what it said. When the Pharisees heard that He had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them tested Him by saying, Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? He said to them, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. He follows up saying that your love of neighbor is the other half of this by saying, the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these 2 commandments. Love for God and love for neighbor. That is our call to holiness. That is what sainthood's about. That is what we are called to. Now, the next slide I have here, I want to give you guys some examples of sainthood. One thing I want to clarify is that in order for you to become a canonized saint in the Catholic Church, you have to go through a series of steps, and a series of requirements have to be met. It starts off with venerable, then you go to blessed, then you go to saint. Blessed Pierre Giorgio is clearly not a saint. He is blessed. He's been recognized by the Catholic Church for the stuff that he's done and whatnot. But I wanted to show him because he's definitely going to be someone that's relatable to you all, as well as all 4 of these saints actually are going to be relatable to you. I strongly urge you, after this presentation or whenever you feel like it, to definitely go back and review the lives of saints. Because it's because of them that we have a better idea how to achieve sainthood. I mean, when you guys come to college, you guys go to class, you have someone sitting in the front teaching you something, right? And the reason he's teaching you is because he has proven that he has knowledge in this subject, correct? I mean, you wouldn't go to accounting class taught by a chemist, right? I wouldn't. For the very same thing, if you want to know how to be a saint, look at the lives of the saints, because they're excellent examples how to love God and to love neighbor. So the first person I want to mention is Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. Born April 6, 1901, died July 4th, 1925. Quite a few years ago, but still relatively recent. He was 24 years old when he died, which means he was about the age of all of us in this room. His father was agnostic. At the age of 17, he joined the St. Vincent de Paul Society and dedicated much of his spare time serving the sick and the needy. He also became a mining engineer so that he quoted, so that he could serve Christ better among the miners. When he graduated from high school, his father offered him two options: a car or money. I personally would have taken the car. Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati took the money and gave it to the poor. This guy also had a beggar come to his house. He answered the door, and he realized that the beggar's son didn't have shoes on, so he took his shoes off and gave them to the kid. He also, while he was on his deathbed, he happened to contract polio while he was serving the poor, the sick, and the needy. While he was on his deathbed, he was still making sure that all the people he had committed to providing shelter for, food for, and medicine for were getting it while he was dying. Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati is an excellent example of loving your neighbor. And again, he was 24 years old. And the best part is that he was a mountain climber. And how many of you would love to be a mountain climber? I'd like to climb a mountain one day before I die. Don't know that it'll ever happen, but I think it'd be kind of cool. But at the same time, he loved art, he loved music, he loved opera. He was a normal guy. He was a normal person, just like all of us in this room. Sainthood is something definitely attainable. And again, if you look at the lives of the saints, that is definitely something you can pick up from their lives. That you can attain this is real, this is tangible. And one of the biggest things definitely that expresses the love of neighbor is that he was at a demonstration in Rome where all of he and his buddies were arrested. And his father was a pretty big political figure, and because of who his father was, he could have gotten special treatment. He refused the special treatment so he could be in jail with his friends because he wanted to share the experience with them. And just a quick side note, his body is uncorrupted too. So like it's still preserved from the day that he died, which I think is pretty sweet. The next scene I have here is St. Gianna Molla. Born October 4th, 1922, died April 28th, 1962. She was canonized on May 16, 2004. That was a short 7 years ago. St. Gianna Molla attended Mass and received communion every day after First Communion until her death. She prayed a rosary daily and accepted whatever happened to her as a gift from God. She was a missionary in Brazil. She started her own clinic. And one of the greatest things to think about St. Gianna Molla is that she earned a degree in medicine and surgery and specialized in pediatrics. How many of you guys want to be a doctor? Really? Okay. That's okay, because everybody in this room knows a doctor, right? I mean, you go to them. Lost my train of thought. Because she was a doctor, much of what she did to serve people was through her patients. Whenever her patients came to her with a problem, no matter what it was, she would help them as long as the solution was in line with her faith and her belief in the Catholic Church. This, and then one thing, she died 7 days after giving birth to her second child. She knew the consequences of giving birth to that second child, and she did it anyway. I just think that's awesome. Now, her husband wrote a letter, as long as the bishops of where she lived, to John Paul II to start her canonization process. And I want to read the excerpt from her letter, from their letter about her. Such a mother and a martyr who, out of love for God and obedience to his commandment, thou shalt not kill, bears witness and exalts the heroism of a Christian wife and mother, sacrifices her life to say yes to the Christian duty of love, and out of her respect for life, God's gift to men. The example of wife and mother is what we, archbishops and bishops of Lombardy, as well as in the name of the faithful, would like to propose today to the whole church, in a time when egoism and violence are rampant. It has become very easy to kill in both hidden and blatant ways. In this, our world prone to introduce the legalization of abortion, the servant of God, Gianna Barrettamola, has become a courageous example of Christian behavior. She was presented with the option of saving her life by aborting her child, and she said no. This child will live. And 7 days after she gave birth to her second child, she passed away. She was a wife, she was a mother, and she was a doctor. And she was a saint. Her love for God and her love for her family follows those examples and those rules to be a saint, loving God and loving neighbor. Probably one of the most popular saints in the church, St. Francis of Assisi. Born in 1181, died in 1226. He fought as a soldier. He loved with the love of pleasure. I mean, this would be a guy you would find sitting in the streets because the wind was blowing the right direction. He loved theater. He loved music. That's what he was about. And he was also from a well-to-do family, so he had very lavish clothing. He had a lot of money, and he definitely wasn't afraid of showing it. In 1204, he had a vision while he was going out on a fight as a soldier, and it directed him back to Assisi, where he lost his taste for worldly life. The singing and the dancing and all of the carousing he used to do with his compadres, he had no desire to do that anymore. He went to St. Peter's to pray, and he came up close to a beggar, and he decided to exchange his clothes with the beggar so that he could be amongst them, and just be with them. And he wanted to beg with them on the corner in front of St. Peter's Basilica, just like the rest of them. And this is what moved him into a life of poverty. He took those beggars' clothes and he maintained his life of poverty after that. The other thing that he did is that he was in San Damiano, the church in Assisi, which I've happened to have had a chance to be there and pray in front of the crucifix where Jesus came down and spoke to him. And Jesus said, "Rebuild my church." And he took this as a little meaning as to rebuild the church that he was in. So he took his money and he went to his father and asked for cloth and whatnot to rebuild the church. His father didn't like what he was doing, so his father fought him on everything. And St. Francis decided to renounce his father publicly and all of his money right there. He literally stripped naked in public, renouncing his clothes and his title and his patrimony. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. He maintained his life of poverty until his death. He also started the Franciscan order, St. Francis, and he also started the Poor Clares, which St. Clare, which was a good friend of his. And as a matter of fact, St. Clare liked what St. Francis was doing and wanted to follow him in his mission in poverty and serving the poor, and that's how the Poor Clare started. The last saint is St. Augustine of Hippo. Born in 354, died in 430. He is definitely the oldest saint that I've mentioned today. And there's a lot of obscure stuff about him because it's very hard to understand at times. But his father was pagan and his mother was Catholic. Trivia question, who was his mother? St. Monica. Even though his mother was Catholic and he grew up Christian, he decided to leave the church. And he definitely lived a hedonistic lifestyle. If there was a pleasure, he was there. He had a concubine, as it was so eloquently put in that part I was reading. He had a concubine for 17 years of his life, and even had a child outside of wedlock. And he was very much embarrassed to express that to his mother but he ended up doing it. After much time battling in faith outside the Catholic Church, he finally did come back and converted to the Catholic Church. Now, before his conversion, he understood that what he was doing with his concubine was wrong. And his...
Can you tell us what is a concubine?
It was like his girlfriend on the side. Like if Marley and I weren't married and doing married things. Listen, that's what he was doing. And he had a child that way. Okay. So anyway, and his infamous prayer was this, because he had the one that he had a child with, then he had another one, and then his mom arranged the society marriage, but she was too young. He didn't want to wait, so he found the other one and decided to end it all because he's like, I'm tired of this. And his prayer was, God, make me chaste, but not yet. But not yet. After he had finally renounced all of that, accepted the Catholic Church, came into the church, he was counseled by St. Ambrose. This guy has a lot of saints in his life. St. Ambrose, who at that time was the Bishop of Milan, and he helped counsel him into coming into the church, as well as becoming a priest and living a life of celibacy. So he went to not being celibate to completely celibate, as well as being the Bishop of Hippo. And during his lifetime, he's also one of the doctors of the church. He defended the church on many of its stances because he definitely, coming from a life, he studied rhetoric, which I'm not 100% sure what that is, but I know it had to do with philosophy and language. He studied that while he was in school, and so he had a lot of his old friends that would come up to him and ask him all this stuff about the Catholic Church, and he was always there to defend it for what it stood for.
Rhetoric is debating. Rhetoric is debating.
There it is. See, she assisted me again today. So a few closing remarks. Most of these remarks come from a book called Fulfillment of All Desire by Ralph Martin. I haven't read this book. I really want to. But Deacon Maher told me that he had a couple comments from the book that would definitely help me out with my talk. And they did. First one being is that holiness is not a burden. It's a blessing. Because holiness is what we are called to do and what we are made to do, and we are created to love, which is our call to holiness, then it's not a burden. In order for us to do the opposite, we have to go outside of ourselves to do the unloving thing, because we are naturally inclined to do the loving thing. Don't look at holiness as this high, big thing that can't be done. It's definitely achievable here on earth. St. Augustine, St. John of Mola, Blessed Pier Giorgio, all of those people. Not to mention all of the other saints. How many of you guys picked a saint at confirmation? Okay. How many of you can tell me what your saints did in their lives? Okay. I couldn't until I came to college. All I know is he was Dominican and black, and that's the reason I picked him. I'm dead serious. Then I come to find out he's the patron saint of barbers. I do math problems. But I definitely encourage you guys to research your saints, because I'm going to tell you right now, they have been praying for you before you even picked them, because they already knew, because they're in heaven with God. They know what's going to happen. But look into your saints. Find out what it is that they did. Learn about their lives, because that's going to be your teacher, your college professor for heaven. Because if you imitate their life and how they fulfilled their call to holiness, how they loved God and loved their neighbor, there it is. You're the same to your college professors for your dissertation when you get to the pearly gates. If you don't study them, if you don't learn more about God, that's going to be a very hard test. Also, aim for heaven. So many times I've been talking with people, and they have this idea, well, I know that there's heaven and there's hell, and I don't want to go to hell, and I really want to go to heaven. And the more that you learn about the church, you'll also understand that there's this thing called purgatory. Now I want to explain purgatory because most of you guys probably have no idea what it is. In order for us to be in heaven, and I don't know where it says this in the Bible, but I read it a couple days ago, it said nothing unclean can enter heaven. And so purgatory is the purgative state where we are cleansed of our sin and any affection for worldly things. Mind you, if you're in purgatory, you're going to get to heaven. But don't aim for purgatory, because if you miss, you may end up in hell. Nobody wants to be there. It's really, really hot. Aim for heaven. If that's your goal, it's just like in class. You go into your exam, you want to get an A, right? Because you want that 4.0 on your transcript. Well, if you aim for a C, how in the world are you going to get the A? Aim for heaven. Aim for heaven. And if you end up in purgatory, that's okay, because you're still going to get to heaven. But don't aim for purgatory. Don't shoot yourself short because it's easy. Aim for the harder thing. And I guarantee you, you'll make it. The only sadness is not to be a saint. What it means to be a Catholic is to be a saint. A rediscovery of the universal call of holiness. Understand the call of holiness, sainthood, you're one and the same. Understanding your call to holiness is understanding your call to be a saint. They're the same thing. All the saints have done have figured out how to love God and to love neighbor. And they are really happy about it. I can promise you that much. Same thing for us. Being a saint is something that we can attain. Now, I want to mention that all the people that I mentioned there that were saints, it seemed like they did a lot of stuff at a very young age. I mean, at 17, Blessed Pierre Giorgio joined the St. Vincent de Paul Society. I still haven't done that. But time is not over. You're not dead yet. How many of you guys are dying tomorrow? Well, you don't know when you're going to die. You don't know when you're going to die. But that's okay. At the same time, there's no better time than the present to start working on your call to holiness. No better time. Right now, today, here we are. Here's your challenge. I want you to leave here today, and I want you to love God, and I want you to love your neighbor, as God has loved us, because he loved us first. Unconditional. To close all of this out, we need to touch on one other subject, and that's the subject of grace. In order for us to love, we have to receive love from God. And grace is the expressions of God's love for man. When you go to Mass and you receive the Eucharist, you receive grace. And that grace is what imparts us with the strength and the courage and the will to go forward to love God and our neighbor. When we sin, we go to confession. When God cleanses our soul and imparts us with grace to go forth to sin no more and to continue loving. Grace is infused in our soul by the Holy Spirit to heal it of sin and to sanctify it. What does sanctify mean?
Doesn't it mean to make holy?
To make holy. Yes. To make holy. All of this stuff comes together. We receive grace from God, which is his love. We show love to God and to our neighbor unconditionally, like he showed love for us on the cross. And that's our call to holiness. That is our call to be a saint. That is the circle that we need to continue perpetuating. Receiving grace from God through the Eucharist, through confession, through prayer. You receive grace through loving your neighbor. You receive grace through loving God. Continue receiving the love from God so that we can impart that on our neighbor and to give thanks back to God. When I read that the other night, grace is infused into our soul and by the Spirit to heal it of sin and to sanctify it. I was like, holy crap. That's my whole talk in a sentence. Grace is part of this mix just as much as love and just as much as being a saint. Being a saint is understanding and then acting upon loving God and loving your neighbor. The last thing I want to leave you with is another music video. I happen to be a huge music fan. Can't sing. Those of you that know me know I can't sing. I feel really bad for my wife at times. But understanding this call is that when we fall down, we have a tendency not to want to get back up. We have a tendency not to want to keep trying on this path that God has set before us. I urge you to draw strength from God and to draw strength from your neighbor. Because this is a community where 2 or 3 are gathered, I am present there. Christ is right here, guys. Lean on him and lean on your neighbor to help you in this fight, to help you in this battle, to help you understand your call to be a saint. And it can be done. And if you rely on Christ and you allow him to pick you up when you fall and impart his grace upon you so that you can go forth and try again, that's where it happens.